Okay, so here I am talking to Lynn, and we're going to be discussing mindfulness today. A little bit of an introduction as to what mindfulness is and how you can use it to improve your health, reduce stress. So we'll jump right in. Hi, Lynn.
Hi, Helen. It's good to be here with you today and have a chat.
Yeah, lovely as well. Do you want to give us an introduction to yourself and how you came to be sort of where you are in working with mindfulness?
Yeah, I suppose I can give you the short version. So my name is Lynn Torstensson. I'm a registered nutrition therapist based in Cork in Ireland, and I practice from a sort of a mindfulness-based, non-diet, health at every size approach. And I suppose I came to this work and the nutrition work through my own journey and my own disordered eating, my own body image issues from my late teens into nearly my mid-20s. So I would say nearly a whole decade before I decided enough was enough. And then from there was a slow evolving process, which has been quite layered. And I started my own journey with no professional support, which I think makes it longer. I think you can do it, but I think depending on how entrenched one's behaviors are, but I definitely, if I'd had somebody to guide me, it would have probably been a bit quicker. Fell upon mindful eating some years ago, kind of a bit into my personal journey after I had qualified as a nutrition therapist. And it really resonates with me. I think I was drawn to the meditation, but also the whole approach of mindfulness coming from a compassionate, non-judging stance. So, but you know, it's been evolving, and then I developed my own mindfulness practice, my meditation practice. Though I would love to say I do it every day, but I don't. But yeah, I like to go to retreats and meditate. Or I suppose it's, as you develop your meditation practice, your everyday life becomes a bit more awake, or you know, you broaden your sense of awareness, you know, and your capacity of picking up on what your own mind is doing.
You mentioned meditation there, and you kind of use the terms meditation and mindfulness interchangeably. Is there a difference between them, or are we kind of thinking they're...
That's a good, actually, do you know, it's a good question. I think mindfulness is a concept that comes from Buddhist practice, but practice is meditation. So that's how you develop your mindfulness, if you like. That's how I look at it anyway. It's the meditation practice that would develop and grow your mindfulness skills. Yeah. But of course, there's lots of different types of meditation, right? You know, like if you come from a yoga background, it might be more guided, or you know, we might have more visualizations. But like the whole point of being still and observing our thoughts and maybe even our sensations in our bodies is a practice to cultivate our overall awareness, which is synonymous with mindfulness. It's, you know, being more aware and awake in our everyday lives. So that's kind of...
Yeah, because I've seen as well that there are a lot of health issues that can be helped by like mindfulness practice or mindfulness-based stress reduction practices. Yeah, I mean, can you give us a bit of insight as to how there is that link, or how is there that effect on health?
Do you know, like there's lots of research. I don't know if they're super clear on exactly how it works, but part of how it works is when we meditate, we develop a stronger prefrontal cortex, which is developed, you know, which is part of, I think, our, you know, our develop empathy and compassion for other people, those types of skills. But actually, like it does strengthen your prefrontal cortex. I think that's part of it. I also think part of it is when we are meditating, we are helping to switch our nervous system into a parasympathetic state rather than a sympathetic state, which I think also then helps for the rest and digest. So that helps with, even like on a physiological level side with things like digestion, because we're less stressed, so we have less stress hormones circulating
So to
around.
people that don't
And our
understand what
digestive system,
parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system is, can you just kind of simplify
yeah,
those?
so it's like part of our nervous system, which is, you know, one of these things that our body does automatically regulating, like without us thinking about it. And it's how we respond to threat. It's part of how our body's responding to threats to keep us safe. So when there's no threats going on, that's when we're relaxed. And when there's lots of threats going on, that's when we're in a stress state. So.
Yeah. Okay. So one is more a heightened state of awareness, and one is more of like a peaceful kind of resting state.
Exactly. Yeah. That's very, very basic. That's what
We'll keep it basic. And how do you imagine, say, for a busy mom then who has 2, 3, 4 kids, sort of baby toddlers, maybe a bit older, and they have no time for themselves, they have no time for looking after their health, but they're struggling a little bit, maybe they're a bit stressed, maybe their health has deteriorated a little bit. How do you think, where would that person start if they thought, oh, this mindfulness sounds, you know, maybe I should give it a go? Like, where would they start in this?
You know, I think that's very interesting, because first of all, I would say start with letting any sort of perfectionism go out the window. That would be the first. So before you even start deciding how you're going to do it, I would say get the perfectionism out. And then, like, we often think about, you know, mindfulness or mindfulness / meditation as you have to sit on a cushion in a formal practice. And I think that is useful, and it's a really kind of helpful way to develop it and strengthen it. But that's really difficult to find a time. So if somebody wanted to do that, you know, there's lots of great apps like Headspace and Calm. And there's another one, Insight Timer, which has a bell, but it also has lots of guided meditations there from different teachers.
Okay.
Great. But I would think, and then people think, oh, you have to do loads of it for it to be effective. Actually, with mindfulness, is more like a consistency. So if you're doing it, if you can do even just like 5 minutes or 10 minutes a day, that's enough. But I personally would say, and maybe, you know, people who are mindfulness teachers shoot me now, but like if you can do something really simple, like I have done with groups, sometimes just a tea drinking meditation. So if you're drinking tea or coffee, and if that is the one snippet that you can carve out in your day for yourself, and that's good enough. And what you do is, like, part of, you know, mindfulness practice is to place your attention on something. So often, you know, in formal practice, it's usually on your breath. But if you were doing it, say, whether you're eating or, say, drinking a cup of tea or coffee, you know, you can place your awareness on the warmth from the mug in your hands, from the aroma, from the taste in your mouth, from the sensation as you're swallowing, all of these things. Or, you know, you may be able to observe where your mind is drifting off to, or, you know, and bringing back to the sensations. And another thing that I love personally doing is when I start feeling really overwhelmed, is actually just to focus on the sensations of my feet, what my feet are doing, feeling with the soles of my feet, you know. So just picking up, if you were outside or even inside, and just engaging your senses and just taking in what you can see and what you can hear, and just those that cuts through some of that mindless thought process, because you're engaging your senses in the present.
So it's great if you can find 5 or 10 minutes in a quiet place in the house to practice sitting down and mindfulness, kind of focusing on your breath. But if you can't find that time in the day, being able to find something else to focus on, just focusing on one simple thing, like you said, like drinking your tea, or
even if you just do that without distractions, I think you're on your way, you know, which actually it sounds really simple, but I think that's quite challenging. And even for some people, eating without distractions can be really difficult. But I mean, even if even if a person did that for, you put the phone away even for the first 10 minutes of your meal, or if you're say busy feeding your family and you're feeding all the kids and it's difficult to eat if you were able to take during the day 10 minutes to eat a snack or a piece of fruit or something with no distractions, then that's fine. That's enough. And it's like the consistency of building that sense of awareness in sensations in our body or what our mind is doing, and noticing that things actually usually come and go. So that's part of it.
Yeah. And for you said that you don't sit down and sort of practice kind of that meditative state every day, but what does your own meditation or mindfulness routine look like?
I wish I was, actually, because I know I really enjoy it, but it just does. I don't know. It hasn't really happened yet. I think I try, and it goes in and out depending on where my life is, to eat with no distractions. That's not always possible, but sometimes that helps. I also actually really like mindful walks. That would probably be one of my things. And just to, as I'm walking, say even just an ordinary walk with my dogs, just paying attention to things I see, rather than trying to be present in my body, rather than, being stuck in my head and, preoccupied or something. So just really becoming aware of my surroundings, noticing things are looking. And what's really interesting, I did an experiment some years ago. I came across a woman called Ellen Langer. If people want to go and check her out on YouTube, she's a mindfulness researcher, but she does it. She comes from a non-spiritual background, so she's very pragmatic, but she's really cool. And she, I can't remember the saying now, but actually part of the book I read was like just noticing things. That's her. Like just simply noticing things. That's kind of her key message. So I started doing that, and I was driving to work every day, and I was going to the exact same route day in, day out, or you go the same route around your housing estate or the same route around the woods or whatever. But when you start to really noticing things and pay attention, you will see that it's never exactly the same. And it's really interesting. So even though you do kind of your same everyday routines, by kind of paying more attention, you notice that it's all shifting. It's really interesting. So you're
creating more of like an awareness of not just your own body and how it feels, but also what is around you and the simple things around you.
Yeah, I think so. And you know what? I think for if somebody's struggling to be in their own bodies for different reasons, and their body sensations are difficult to sit with, starting from the external place, it's easier to cultivate some of that attention and awareness, and then slowly bring it inwards, because it can be quite difficult for some people to
be in their body,
just sit still and observing your breath. That can actually be anxiety provoking, I think. So that's what I like doing. You could start from wherever you're comfortable, from whatever you're noticing. So if it's just walking, and that's, I think as well, even for me personally, actually moving sometimes it's a lot easier than if you're sitting still. So walking really slowly, paying attention to what your feet is doing, things like that can be a lot easier if you're starting off than if you're just sitting on a cushion. And a lot of people say, I could never do that, or I can't meditate because I can never bring my mind back, it goes everywhere. But it's like, as soon as you notice that your mind is drifted somewhere else, you're being mindful. So and it's a practice.
I'm just trying to imagine, if like someone is driving the kids to school or something, and there's a couple of kids in the back or whatever, even just kind of being able to take a couple of breaths and maybe notice some things about their route driving to the school drop off or something would be, and even a bit of a start. It doesn't mean someone has to take time out of their day where they're already rushed, where they could start to implement that in small chunks in a manageable way.
Even maybe when you've dropped the kids off to school, to be on the way home, to have time to look at something. Or, years ago I came across another wise person, one of the first self-help books I read, and I can't remember what the thing is. The book is called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. So it's mindfulness, but in a very practical sense. And one of the tips this guy had was that, you know, there's transition periods. So say if you were coming from work before you enter home, to, you know, take a couple of minutes in your car, for example, when there's nobody there, and they don't, you know, if you're 5 minutes later, than what you're expected, that's not going to really, nobody's going to make a difference from those. But those 5 minutes to yourself with, you know, no distractions might make all the difference as you are leaving the work stress behind and then entering into, you know, busy home life. So things like that can be useful too. Or, you know, if you were prepping food, for example, and maybe you have more space, then you can be paying attention to that process if the busyness of eating is going to be a bit chaotic. Like there's ways of, I think if we sort of dial down the expectations of what we should be able to do or what it should look like, then we have more capacity to build in some basic mindfulness in our everyday lives.
Something that tends to come up with a lot of the women that I speak to, and it's before you even get to the issue of what people are eating, is how people eat. And I hear it, you would be surprised at how often I hear, you know, my diet isn't that bad, my diet is quite good, I eat all the right stuff, but I don't pay attention when I eat like mindlessly. And people find themselves kind of, when they're in that state of like a mindless kind of state, they find themselves eating the wrong things then and kind of overeating certain foods. So how would going into maybe the more mindful eating, if someone was looking to try and correct some eating habits that perhaps weren't ideal, what would be the first steps then for someone to start down that path?
I think the first thing would be to practice compassion, that we are human, we're doing the best we can where we're at. And, you know, we don't want to forget that compassion is a really big part of mindfulness too. It's like this, the second part or the other half of it. Like you have the awareness of one part and you have the compassion and the other part. But when you move from there, do you know a simple exercise that we call it mini meditation? Is like when people, and of course this may only be possible if you have, you know, young kids and the family means quite chaotic. This may not be possible at this time, but there may be other times we can practice this throughout the day. Would
maybe
be
if someone's at work or exactly,
or, you know, if you have a time, if you're eating your lunch by yourself or a snack on your own or something, and you know, you can do this even if you were sitting in your car having a snack, as long as you weren't driving, you could do this. And it would just be to like basically take a breath, a deep breath, and is you either close your eyes or just focus inward, and then, you know, check in with oneself to see how hungry you are. And usually we ask on a kind of a level of 1 to 10, and of course that scale is subjective to people's own experience. So what your symptoms, say for 7, might be different for how I would experience it. And then the question is, so say I'm checking in, so right now I'm fairly content, so I'm probably at a 6 or 7. I'm not really hungry, so but you know, you might notice. And then the follow-up question is, how do you know? Like, how do you know that you're at a 5 or 3 or 2? And but even like by doing that pausing, you're creating like that shift in your nervous system, just so that things just slow down. So even if you don't turn inwards and check in, even just taking like the moment, just let things settle before you tuck in, can just create that shift to, you know, allowing things to slow down a bit. And of course, you know, I'm not a great fan of these making mindful eating to this rigid rule-like practice, which you see often, particularly as a tool to control portion sizes or things. Like mindfulness actually is not really about control. It's about being able to be flexible and attuned. But you could, you know, I mean, chewing is important. That's what I was trying to get to. So even if you don't chew the food 50 times or whatever is recommended, actually still using our teeth is beneficial for our digestive system, for our taste buds to actually have a chance to taste the food we're eating and see if we really like it. Or do you know what happens sometimes with people is they just, you know, when they slow down a bit, they discover that actually the food they loved eating, they don't, because they don't actually enjoy the taste of it. It happens to me every once in a while with chocolate and stuff. It's like, I don't really know if I like this. Sometimes I do, and sometimes you know, I don't know if I like it. Depends on form, but it's you know. And if you're eating something that you really enjoy, you get more out of it too. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can experience last a bit longer because, you know, it's fleeting. So if I was having a slice of cake earlier and coffee, I was in town and I was really enjoying the cake. So like, if I was just like wolfing it down in 3 big bites, I can get to enjoy the flavor of it. So that's another thing. So I mean, chewing for sure, but I don't think we have to be you know, super strict. It has to be X amount
chew it this amount of times. It
feels tedious. But chewing, actually, overall, a lot of people don't. You know, I'm sure you see that as well in your practice. You know, I don't eat in our stomachs, you know.
And then on the other side of then, once we've ate food, whether it's a snack or whether it's a meal, because I don't think mindfulness should be used as a kind of a diet tool, or like you said, you know, a rigid something to stop you eating at a certain point. You know, people think, oh, I should eat when I'm hungry and stop eating when I'm full, but that's not really what mindfulness is about either. It's not to make you eat less as such.
No, because you might, do you know the way like you put food on a plate and sometimes your eyes are bigger than your belly and sometimes they're not, you know what I mean? Like, it's okay to finish what's on your plate and then check in and discover actually you're still not satisfied or full, and you can go for seconds, and that's okay too. So I think like mindfulness helps to create that attunement with our bodies. So knowing that knowing what it feels like when we've had enough. And I think actually part of that is knowing we have to overshoot a bit sometimes to know where that line is. And being kind with ourselves and not judging ourselves as that is happening, as we're learning how our body's responding to different foods. I think it's really important, because you often see a lot of people getting stuck there. So they overshoot, and there may be lots of reason for that. And then they just like beat themselves up about that. But then when you're back in that shame loop, you're not actually having an opportunity to learn from your experience. So I think that's really important. You know, we can become curious about how different foods feel in our bodies, how different types of foods or food combinations keeps us satisfied or full, and how long that lasts. And, you know, all of these things we can get really curious about. There's lots of value in that. Yeah.
What about if someone says, I'm an emotional eater? I eat when I'm sad, or I eat when I'm stressed, or I eat when I've had an argument with someone, or I've had a hard day at work. Is emotional eating a thing? And how could mindful eating address that, or help someone figure out if what's really going on?
Helen, you're asking great questions.
Telling you. This is all from clients. This is all what people ask me and what people say to me.
That's really, I mean, it's super valid. Do you know, within the sort of non-diet and health at every size approach and stuff, there's a few different schools there. I think it's in diet culture, emotional eating is bad, full stop. We want to curb it. We want to sort of, and I think underlying message of that is because overeating causes weight gain is bad, being fat is bad, and that's kind of where it's coming from. I think from what I've seen, both sort of like in the literature and, you know, through supervision and training, and with my personal experience and my client experience, first of all, the deprivation driven eating has to be sorted. So we're not eating emotionally because we've overeaten, because we were over hungry, and now we're feeling bad that we ate too much, but actually that's just our bodies responding to a form of restriction, whether it's short term or long term or whatever.
Yeah.
First of all, that cycle has to be healed. Then and making sure that the body is getting adequate amount of food, even from a nutrition point of view, so that we don't have some of these cravings because our body's not fed enough. And then after that, I definitely think that emotional eating is real, where we use food as one of our coping tools, so that we are using it, as a way of numbing out. So we just eat we eat as a distraction, and we get like when we eat past uncomfortable fullness and all this, which I think is when it really becomes a problem, or when it's problematic, I should say, and when it may not serve us. Because if I have one bar of chocolate or a small packet of crisps or an ice cream because I'm sad or happy, or because it's I have a slice of birthday cake because it's a celebration or whatever, and that is technically eating emotionally, I don't think that's a problem. The problem, it becomes problematic then, A, when it's our only tool, and B, when we're using it to numb out, when we get to the stage where we're eating volume of foods in a frenzy, we're not present for it, and then actually we're really physically uncomfortable too, not just emotionally, like beating ourselves up for this coping tool. So how I practice is, it's always okay to eat. Like, the permission is always there, even if it's not serving us, because we probably do it for a reason. So then you have to give the permission, so you can get curious of how it's serving us, and then you can work backwards from there and see. Like, so circling back to where mindfulness can be helpful then is to become aware of when we're about to, what's triggering the behavior, when we're about to start it, to even if we decide, as we increase our capacity and our awareness, we may decide that we are going to go ahead with the binge anyway, or the eating the food anyway, even though we're not physically hungry, and that's okay, but we can be more present for it. And we may, as we're more present, we may be able to stop sooner. And then you may also get to the point where you have more capacity and you make a different choice. And that choice can be a distraction, or that choice, depending on, I think, how much capacity we have to sit with our emotions. So this is where actual formal meditation practice can be really useful, because you're building up that capacity. And as you learn to sit with whatever comes up, then you can ride it out. But
you can deal with something that's a bit harder.
But that's a process. And I think, my advice is not that people are like making life harder for themselves. So, depending on people's backgrounds and stories, to work with somebody to help build that capacity, or find other tools or distraction, or, how to navigate those things. But it's definitely, like, food as a coping mechanism for difficult emotions is definitely real. But it's not, if we kind of remove the stigma from it, it's easier to get curious how we're going to support ourselves in other ways.
So from what you sort of said there's nearly like a cycle. So we eat because of our emotions, and then we feel bad because we ate because of our emotions. And then that feeling leads to maybe even deprivation then. So we say we shouldn't have ate that, so we should eat less now. And that thought process comes round about the whole way around again, and leads us to, because we feel bad because what we've done from the guilt, so it leads us round to emotional eating again. And mindful eating might be able to kind of poke its nose in there and break that cycle gradually, as it, it might not kind of stop any kind of overeating or binging episodes like straight away, but it could start to kind of dent into that kind of cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as you are becoming more aware of, say, both your physical hungers, meeting those needs, becoming aware of your triggers, becoming aware even of your emotional landscape, what it is you're feeling, and knowing that even if you're feeling angry or sad, and have healthy ways to release those. So that's, really more a therapist type of work.
Yeah.
But having some of those skills helps us. And then, but yeah, because it definitely works that way. So we eat and then we feel bad about that. And then we may eat some more because that's how we cope. So like it's a vicious cycle that way. And I think where compassion practice then really helps too, so that when we do this behavior, it is serving us in one way, and that we can be kind to ourselves. And, as a binge episode might have happened, that the one way to cut through some of that is to actually, be kind to ourselves and speak kindly to ourselves rather than letting the inner critic just have a complete field day. So, one episode might have happened for whatever reason, but it's not going to continue on for another one as an add-on, because we're using the self-compassion to sort of say, this is hard, I'm going through something tough, it was hard, I don't feel so good because I'm eating this food, but I it's okay, I'm not going to add more to it, we might be sad, we might hold ourselves, and things like this. And just to, the kind of definition of self-compassion is to speak to ourselves as we would to a good friend. So, and most of us probably wouldn't have many friends if we spoke to them as the way we do to ourselves.
And do you think there's a link then between, because we tend to, if we go on a diet or we pursue weight loss, we put ourselves in this state of deprivation where we say we're not allowed certain foods, and then that can nearly directly lead to what people sort of, what we think of as emotional eating then.
Oh,
because
absolutely.
it's a bad, like if we put this label as it's a bad food, and therefore we're drawn to it, and there's just some kind of outside, we're just drawn to this food for whatever reason.
Oh, absolutely. I think what you're talking about sounds like the emotional or the mental restriction, where we decided that certain foods are off table. So then we happen to have one, or some, where say chocolate, that's really bad, or even sugar in a more general sense, that's bad. And then, you're a bit hungry there after lunch, and somebody comes to work with a birthday cake and you just have some. And then this is often what happens, and this is my personal experience being this too, that then you have it, and then you go to hell with it, and then you just continue on and eat more and more and more. And it's not that piece of cake that ruined anything. It's all the stuff that follows afterwards, which is usually not particularly enjoyable either, because you just kind of go, sure, I've eaten a bowl of ice cream, I've ruined it, so I might as well have the whole tub. And there's usually no enjoyment in any of that. Whereas you sit down, you eat your ice cream, and it's not good or bad, and you're having a good time with it, and it's fine. It's no big deal. You just move on. That's how these normal eating people eat, That's why, and I think the other side of the dieting as well is usually you're on some kind of a plan, and the portion sizes are controlled. And who's going to know how much your body is needing at any one time except for you? So if this portion is not sustaining me, I've also been there, you're actually physically hungry. And so your body goes, hello, I need food, feed me. And you're trying to override that with your willpower until your blood sugar is on the floor. And then there's nobody holding, the intentions back. And then you eat food, which is actually your body trying to make sure that you stay alive. But, that was not in the plan. So now we feel bad about that. And then again, we're back to hell with it and continue on eating. Though actually that may feel like an overeating episode, but actually in reality, what it is just your body telling you that it needs more food. Yeah, exactly.
So if we could say, give people like 3 things to think about or to work on if they feel that they're an emotional eater, they eat emotionally, would try as far as is possible to not deprive yourself of the things that you really like but you think you shouldn't. That would be one thing.
Yeah, I would say what came to mind as you spoke, first of all, I would say try to remove all the good and bad labels.
No
if
labels,
they go, then, and if food is neutral, well, you're not bad if you eat something that is anything you eat, and you have more space then to notice what food is good for you. You know, what food feels good in your body, and that might be different. You might be able to eat certain things. I don't like them, or they don't feel good to me. And then actually also when you were talking, I was thinking about, you know, often people tend to overeat at night or in the evening time. And there might be two reasons for that. I think the first one, which is really common, which I see a lot all the time, is people have gone too long without food, or they haven't been eating enough during the day. So this is a really good exercise for people to maybe just do a basic food diary. So there's no judgment attached to this either, but just write down the food they're eating, the time, and then do that for maybe 3 or 4 days, so that you because the recall is quite unreliable. So, you know, when you've written stuff down, you might see that you know, you have a really small lunch at maybe 12, and then your next meal is at 7. That's 8 hours. You know, no wonder then, if you're a busy mother and you're running after kids and you're doing school runs, and then you're going to prepare the dinner, and you're wondering why you're eating all around you at that time. And the other thing that I'm kind of starting to wonder about, but people do some of that, I think also the food, like maybe not so much the dinner, but you know, the evening snacking that people do often, I think is sometimes like a calm down. It's like an unwind you know, strategy. I think we're using food in a way to ground ourselves. So I would say I think if people do that and they feel, oh God, you know, I wish I wouldn't, because, you know, if you eat too close to bedtime, you may not have a good night's sleep. Like, you know, if you have too much of a volume of food too close to bedtime, it's just like, not that it's bad, but it might just be uncomfortable, and it may affect our sleep. So, you know, from a self-care perspective, we may want to pare it back a bit. Again, I would think you might just be looking at people's stress levels, or overall, is there another way to calm down at that? You know, is it, again, as well with meal timing, is it that, you know, if the evening meal is quite early, so if somebody's eating at 5 and they don't go to bed until maybe 11, it may be too long of a stretch too. So it's like, you know, and sometimes it's just like mindless snacking, and I'm not saying if people feel like it serves them, that's fine too. But if somebody says, oh, do you know, I don't feel great when I sit down in front of the TV and eat a bunch of stuff, because, you know, I go to bed and I feel full, and I wake up in the morning and it's like food is sitting in my stomach, and it just doesn't feel good. I think as well, meal timing could be good, but I do have a feeling, just the same as a glass of wine might do the same job in that kind of sense. It's a come down, and that's that's what it's serving. And there may be other things, you know, maybe going for a walk, or, you know, breaking that transition from a really stressful down day to bring us down a bit. There might be other tools that might be.
There's something someone said to me recently. It's when the kids go to bed that then they sit down and they have something nice. And I know myself, when you have kids, it's very hard to be mindful and in the present, because you're always in this distracted state. So I suggested that maybe you have that food that's particularly nice once the kids have gone to bed, because that's when you can actually be mindful and find that food satisfying, and you can take the time to enjoy it, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. And being mindful in that process is part of the journey to
I think that's a great too. I think so. You know, if that serves somebody, then I think that's a really good thing. So
so you'd be looking at, sort of, to give people kind of a takeaway, you're looking at taking away labels. There's no good or bad food. Try not to deprive yourself. Make sure you eat enough during the day to you know, so your body isn't actually physically hungry, but also to get adequate nutrition. And that's where you could focus on getting more good things into your diet rather than taking bad things out. You know, look at it in a positive way. And also, the emotional eating doesn't necessarily have to be a problem. It's kind of it is a normal thing for us to eat in instances that when we're not hungry. There's lots of kind of times that we do that, and that's kind of normal, and it's fine. And to have that attitude rather than this bad, you know, we've been bad, we need to
Yeah, because I think it's only problematic when we're eating to a place of real uncomfortableness.
Yeah.
Then it's problematic, and then it may be good to work with somebody on
Yeah.
sort of slowly unpacking that
Yeah.
piece, looking
Yeah.
at, you know, what's around that. But yeah, I mean, the less like, and the kinder we can be to ourselves in the whole process, knowing that we're trying to do the best we can where we're at, and then, you know, we might learn something new and we'll try to do different or better because we know different or know better. That, you know, we're usually doing, even with behaviors that don't necessarily seem to serve us on the surface, they tend to be doing something for us that we wouldn't, you know.
Yeah. Just one last thing I wanted to ask your opinion on, because I know this could be sort of a scientific question, so I don't expect you to kind of give me scientific answers or anything like that. But in your experience, if someone says to me that, say, a woman, and they find that their eating pattern is different according to the time of month, so they relate their eating and their how much they eat in relation to hormones and hormones fluctuating. Is that a thing, do you think? Is there a basis for that, or is that linked to something else?
It's really interesting. It really wants me to go and check out PubMed and stuff. I think just like opinion wise, with no scientific, just kind of like from observing or from my own patterns. I mean, I wonder, like, it would make sense, you think, that if we want maybe more food, or I know for myself, definitely, you know, after I finish bleeding and stuff around that time, that I would be looking, I could feel myself craving red meat, which I don't tend to eat, you know, I don't eat it every day or even maybe every week. But that would be something that I noticed my body might be calling for around, you know, that at that time. Would also make sense that at certain time of our cycle we want more food, because if we were preparing, if our bodies were preparing for a potential pregnancy, you'd be thinking that it would want more.
Yeah, a little bit of extra storage.
You know, depending on, you know, PMS symptoms and things like that, it might also throw people's appetites off and things. So yeah, I think it does make sense, an intuitive sense, in a way, that our appetites or desires might fluctuate.
And I suppose that's the difficulty if someone is following a diet plan then, and they have portion sizes. So if their requirements do go up and down through the course of a month, and they get to the point where their diet plan says they should be eating this amount of calories, but their body really needs more, that sends them to not eating as much as their body needs, and perhaps down that cycle of overeating down the line, because it's the body's kind of mechanism.
Yeah, because the body, exactly, the body is trying to is trying to make you compensate for what you're not giving it. So, like, you know, part of this work is really, I feel, to trust our body knows what they're doing, and you know, we can go into the whole reason why we might not, which is so connected to diet culture and
so it's definitely something to explore and use mindfulness for, whether there is kind of fluctuations, and kind of going with it if there are differences one day to the next, and feeling that that's not a problem. And
that's why, you know, I think one part of the reasons that diets don't work is because nobody is going to know how much your body needs except for you. You know, and I think, like, you know, you see it, you have a young daughter, and I'm sure you see as well how she eats different amounts at different times, or different times of the day, and you know, and it just fluctuates. And if you kind of leave her alone, it's her body will self-regulate. And I think even as adults, our bodies do that. You know, if you've been sick for, say, a couple of days and you had no appetite, and then all of a sudden it comes back with a vengeance, and you just eat. And I, you know, trusting that our bodies are really intelligent and wise, and that they're not out to get us, but they're actually out to, the primary job is to make sure that we stay alive. That is so important in this work, I think. And it's very
think it's a really interesting one for a parent to kind of be able to use mindfulness, possibly, because if you have young kids, and maybe you worry about how much they're eating when they do eat, when they eat too much, or any of these things, to remember that they're born knowing how much they need to eat. And then really trying to replicate that in yourself a little bit, and think, you know, it's okay to eat less sometimes and more sometimes. That's just, it's how, like you say, how our bodies can regulate. And like when you think of animals in the wild, they don't have this kind of, oh my God, how much of this leaf should I eat, you know, or how much of this kill should I eat, or, you know, any of these. That's not a, and you could argue that humans are different animals. Of course they are. But in general, you know, we all have this regulation thing inside us. And yeah, I think mindfulness can be a good tool to zone back in that. And if a parent kind of takes time to observe their child, that's like the best example to use nearly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, you can also use the mindfulness in that instance where you can notice where your own mind is going as you're observing what they're doing, and you there's worry there about, you know, them eating too much or not enough, or not getting everything they need and stuff, and just be where that thought sticks to you without actually acting on it, which is a really interesting, which is part of mindfulness, just being an observer. Yeah. I hope that's been useful.
That was kind of the main topics I wanted to talk about. Was there anything else that you wanted to add, Lynn? Were you happy enough?
Good questions.